we want to be a place that is a local neighborhood destination. We want to be for San Antonio. That said, when people from out of town come to town, we want them to experience what we're building and say, wow, we got something in San Antonio going on.
So today we have Alex Hillme. We're in San Antonio at Studio O with Hunter. Hunter, can you give us a little summary of who you are and what you do?
Sure. So Hunter Kingman, I'm with Hixon Properties. We're a local, primarily San Antonio focused real estate development company. Like to focus on urban product, but not necessarily a specific type. So we've done hotels, we've done spec offices, we've done storage facilities, we've done apartments, we've done parking garages, and most recently we have decided to embark on a food hall. So,
awesome. And Alex, give us your premise again.
Sure.
Your summary.
Yeah. So Alex Hillme, most of you guys probably know the company of Hillme. We're now Valence, but the reason why I was so excited about having this discussion today is because we predominantly do, branding and strategy and business development in whether it's infill or it's urban core, but it has a lot to do with hospitality and urban development, F&B programs, that kind of thing. And we've worked with Hunter and his partners and his team at Hixon on a couple of different projects now. But one of the things that I noticed, which I feel should be the point of this conversation today, has to do with intentionality and focus on certain types of industries, certain types of people that could kind of be stewards to the city. And out of all of the people in the real estate world that I've worked with, I feel like what Hixon is doing is very impactful, and it's very honest, and it's very aware of how their projects can help kind of guide and help course the city and the trajectory to help it go onward. So, yeah, that's where I'm sitting. I've loved everything that we've worked on together, and the food hall that Hunter was referencing is very close to home. I'm a big foodie, and I've noticed a couple things along the way, and just the way that you take all these different. It's kind of like an amalgam or a culmination of different eateries and different entrepreneurs, and it's in an interesting part of town for this thing to work. Or if there's a possibility that it wouldn't work, then I would love to discuss how the success is attributed to kind of the premise behind it. So that's why I'm here. Thanks for having me.
I love it. Give us a little bit of give us some reconnaissance on the design of putting Make Ready where it's at, and what was the structure and the creative on that.
Yeah. So the part of my job that is fun is you get to I have about that much creative in me, and so I have enough creative to know who creative people are, and that's a skill, I guess, unto itself, and I'll take credit for that skill. But beyond that, it's finding the right people like Alex, like our architect team, and otherwise to assemble them and give them the freedom to kind of make it great. And I think that's the opportunity we have at Make Ready, especially. I mean, David Lake, we were working with both Lake Flato and Overland Partners, who are architects well-renowned outside of San Antonio, but also happen to bookend our neighborhood with their offices. And so we said, who's gonna commit the most time and put the most into it? This was 8 years ago, contributing and saying, how can this neighborhood be great? And so we let them work together, which was a fun little tussle. And one thing that came out of that was Overland Partners office is in this beautiful building that's actually quite similar in footprint and size and even original construction time frame to the Make Ready building. And we thought, well, yeah, it's going to be a creative office. We can throw 70 people in there on a daily basis. It'll be a great feel. And David Lake said, you're going to miss a huge opportunity if you do that. And David's not one to mince words. And he said, you can't let that be a static space. It's got to be transient. It's got to have people that are fresh faces on a daily basis, because it's the nexus. It's going to be the node, the center of the neighborhood. And so you've got to do something more compelling with it. And he was right. And then he got to leave, and the rest of us got to figure out how to do a food hall. So it's been a fun one. But no, it was absolutely the right decision. And so we're excited about the fact that we're finally at that precipice where we're about to open and see those fresh faces on a daily basis.
So it's supposed to be a static space, meaning like a
recurring same folks every day. So an office is a place where people are very get very regimented and regular. You know, they show up at the same time. They post-COVID maybe a little bit less regular, but they show up at the same time. They have their routines. They get their coffee, you know, they from the same space, and then they go, and maybe they, you know, get a little different in the afternoon, but it's mostly the same routine every day. And so getting a group of folks that are interacting with the space more organically on a more infrequent basis, but more people through there at the same time is really the target. And so you want to be that place for collision from folks of all sides of town. Alex mentioned the location within the city, and that was one thing we identified. You know, we are at a point in town where it's a great opportunity for an urban neighborhood in San Antonio. There's going to be multimodal ability there. People can walk there on the Riverwalk. They can bike there. But we also recognize we live in Texas and San Antonio, and if we turn our face away from the vehicle, we're going to fail. And so making sure that we have that accessibility for people to come from all parts of town. We've got great connection via arterials and highways that get us right into the neighborhood. And so being that point where folks from the west side, south side, east side, north side can all come together is something that does excite and energize our team. Hopefully that gets accomplished, and it doesn't just become, you know, just for the neighborhood. We want it to be for the neighborhood, most definitely, but we also want it to be for broader San Antonio. And that's part of the motivation for a food hall. You bring these different local operators into it that have a vested interest in the overall community, and those ties, all of their connections, start to kind of intertwine together and bring people to the space. So that's the kind of motivating factor for a food hall, and it's been a fun one. I would say it's the hardest 10,000 square feet I've ever taken on in my real estate career, but it's really an operating business, less about the real estate. So,
and I think that's a really good point. So you're in this kind of interstitial there, you know, on Broadway, between, you know, there's the Pearl area, there's Alma Heights, there's downtown, there's Southtown, and you're basically bridging a community, and that's how my mind works. I live in the gray area, so I love the confusing kind of middle of the road kind of thing. But you guys were very intentional on the types of businesses that you were going to have in there. And granted, there are the office spaces. There's the Soto, there's, you know, CPS, there's thousands of people that are able to interact with it consistently in like more of a static environment. But on the organic side, it would have been simpler to, let's say, build a shopping mall and get a Verizon Wireless in there or whatever it may be. So I've seen firsthand how much vetting and how much effort you guys have put into figuring out the right type of people to be a part of this project. But I'm curious as to the why. Like it's not just about the quickest way to turn a buck, which I think, you know, developers sometimes can get a bad rap, but I feel like you're kind of flipping that on its head. So what about this project made you kind of dig your heels in or be a stick in the mud compared to conventional just looking at the ROI?
Yeah.
Like why did you guys do it correctly, in my opinion?
Well, thank you for that. But look, the why is always a layered answer, and so I'll try to be reasonably concise. But I mean, it starts with, in real estate development, we have shareholders that expect a return on their investment, right? We want to make money on the projects we take on. We're not going to shy away from that. That said, we also have shareholders who are Hixon family members, and their name, I mean, you worked with us on a rebrand, so you got to learn a lot about that structure. But we have a very unique structure where the family has been involved in business together for a long time. They like to stay behind the scenes, but that said, it is their name on the company. And we have a dual mandate of making them money, keeping them together as a family business, which one leads to the other, and also that sense of pride in what we take on. And so no disrespect to the strip centers that are out there and those type of things, but I think if we were building strip centers only for our constituent of shareholders, I think we would be failing at our job. I don't think we'd be inspiring reciprocally them and them back to us. It's a little bit of a virtuous cycle, and it's a very, very unique company model in that way. And so they've enabled us to go out and reach. So we build a mass timber office building, right? We can look at that through a long-term lens. That doesn't mean it has to perform financially. Every project we take on has to perform financially. And so believe me, we number crunch with the best of them in that regard, but it does enable us to number crunch on projects that maybe are not as conscripted. And so we can spend the time on the front end. I mean, you've been working on this project. Granted, we got a little waylaid by COVID on this one, but I mean, we've been touring food halls for 4 or 5 years now, looking for best practices across the country. Pine Street Market in Portland is one that we really identified as great, and we said, okay, how do we try to recreate that in San Antonio? And so we called the guy, JP Villette. He's great. He's very talented. He's a sculptor. He's an architect. He's just kind of an entrepreneur on all sides, and he had put the deal together and was this incredible resource to us. And so learning from the best, identifying those folks that have done it well before you. I went to UVA as my undergrad, and Thomas Jefferson. So I drink the Kool-Aid on Thomas Jefferson a little bit, and one thing that he got credit for a great deal was as an inventor. You know, you go to Monticello and you see the things that he instituted in his house. He was just stealing from France. He was a great usurper, right? He did not really come up with these ideas. He just introduced them to a new place. And I think that's a lot of what real estate development is. If you try to do it well, it's real estate. It's not new, right? I mean, people have been building things for a long time. And so how do you kind of put that puzzle piece together in a way that's compelling to folks and maybe not familiar to them in their geography? And so that's the fun opportunity we've had on this particular project. Whether it's the mass timber in the office building or recreating a space that already was make ready. I mean, you know, when we were working on naming with Alex and his team, it was probably one of the easiest tasks Alex has ever been tasked with was, what do we call this place? And so
it's already there.
Yeah. And so, you know, but it was great. And so it's been fun to repurpose.
Yeah. So that's interesting you say that, because people have been doing this for forever. Yeah. But just going into like some of the earlier episodes that we've had about differentiation, we were talking about going to Portland, and you've been working on this for, I think you said 8 years. Like, you're doing the due diligence. Right. It's not like if I told you to meet me at the Starbucks, it'd be like, okay, you know where that building is? It's across from that. But Make Ready is the place where you say, you know, it's Make Ready. Like, that is the destination. Right. It's not a byproduct or a subset of something else that's already out there. But yeah, I feel like what you guys are doing really allows San Antonians or in any other community that you're doing this in to have a place to experience and talk about
Right.
whenever they're back at home.
Yeah.
And the places that I like to go to, whether it's local or it's
Right.
statewide, nationwide, international, are places that you want to tell stories about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that you want to remember. And I've always found what you guys are working on to be very memorable. And yeah, it's not completely reinventing the wheel, but out of the development world, it is pretty different. Even though it's fundamentally the same thing. There's still the pro forma. There's still the build. There's still the cost. There's still the investors and everything like that. But I think it's a little more profound. It's a little more impactful. So I really appreciate what you guys are doing. And that's why I love working with you guys.
I think it's a lot more creative. I think you're a lot more creative than you give yourself. Because that's like one of the things that we do, like when we're like searching for stuff as just like, and it just in the visual space or like the conceptual space of like, what can we create next? Mm-hmm. Say, for example, this, like my friend has one in Austin that he was on one of our podcasts. And I looked at that and I was like, okay, that's awesome. How do I do it better? And I think that's what you did whenever you guys were, in a way scouting these other food halls. It's like, how do we do this and how do we do it better? Mm-hmm. For our city. And I love that because I am sure we all travel and we say that line of like, dang, I wish we had one of these. Mm-hmm. I wish we had one of these. And one of the other things I was talking about was one of my other friends that has a restaurant in San Antonio. I was like, do you realize that San Antonians, we need to evolve we need to go forward. We have these places like that are coming like Make Ready and these awesome restaurants. And then you have San Antonians like complaining that it's like, oh, why is my coffee $7? Why is my coffee $8? I can just go to Valero. And it's like, you don't go to a different city and want a Valero. You go to a different city and you want that craft coffee. You want, those restaurants. But I think it's awesome that you said that, because I think that's the way I think a lot, where it's like we see a video, we see a photo, we see a concept, and we're like, okay, or a podcast, and it's like, how do we make it better?
Yeah, and I think, you mentioned our city, and I think that's a lot of the why as well. So we're all local here, and I think as you travel to other places, anyone who one has to, run into someone at the grocery store where they live and answer to what they've been doing in the city.
I ran into John at HEB.
Yeah, I think, and there's a certain level of pressure to perform when it's your backyard. Mm-hmm. One, but two, I think it's a desire to perform when it's your backyard, and I think the best projects are always not always, but most often mm-hmm. rooted in people that have a vested interest beyond just the return on investment. And I think that's part of what drives our company for sure, is that motivation to make the city better. And it definitely makes projects harder. I'm not going to lie. I mean, to do a project that just pencils financially, that's hard enough and risky enough as it is.
Right.
To do something that pencils and also is accretive to the community and has an indelible impact for a long period of time. At least that's your aspiration going into it. It definitely motivates,
right?
And I think it makes ultimately a better project in the long run to have that kind of pressure behind it. But it is a layer of challenge that can be. Sometimes sometimes you look at it and you're like, man, maybe I should just do a strip center. Why not? And no offense to strip centers, they serve. I want to be careful not to be, slinging mud, because they serve a purpose and they're there. And Valero is a great mm-hmm. corporate citizen of San Antonio, and they're going to be a sponsor after what you just said. I can tell, but of the podcast. But no, I mean, everything fills a need. We're just trying to identify that need that does have something behind it that appeals to we want to be a place that is a local neighborhood destination. We want to be for San Antonio. That said, when people from out of town come to town, we want them to experience what we're building and say, wow, we got something in San Antonio going on. Pearl's done a beautiful job with that here.
Yeah.
And we want to just kind of build off of that and contribute in the same way, which allows the overall macro San Antonio economy to do better. If you can appeal to people outside San Antonio, that's the best thing for San Antonio. So that said, our focus is be where locals want to go.
Yeah, no, that's beautifully said. And it is tough. It's not the quickest way to turn a dollar. It's definitely not the path of least resistance, but it's definitely a kind of a marathon, not a sprint. And that takes patience. And especially nowadays where everything is almost instant gratification. If there's a 5-year plan, but it's like, all right, well, if we want to do it with these core values and this methodology, it's going to be 10 years. We'll ultimately probably make way less money or potentially lose money, but it's what this area and this district needs. And that could be funded with more conventional, business practices and enterprises and everything like that. But that just resonates a lot with me because I've always gotten pushback, with my team about these kind of like lofty or almost like drunken decisions, and they're like, "Are you sure you want to do that? Like that's not like the black and white. That's not the ones and zeros. But if you can get behind it regarding like what is the final outcome going to be, and is this something that will outlive us? Because we'll all be gone one day, but that place won't. That building's already been there for fucking, I don't know, decades. So it's going to continue to kind of organically have its own, breadth and life and everything like that. So, yeah, you pretty much touched on everything I was curious about.
I really love the pressure aspect of it. Because, like...
Sometimes I do.
I was like, it's easier said from the outside.
Well, yeah. No. I mean, from, like, just the inside with me is, like, I'm not saying that knowing the pressure you guys go through. I just saying that knowing the pressure I go through with certain things. And I think I said it on our first podcast, where I said anytime I feel inadequate, I get that feeling of inadequacy or like immense pressure. I know something is big. Something big is gonna happen. Yeah. Like you never do. Not that I never, but the times I've done awesome, great stuff that like
proud of,
that I'm proud of, that like has like aged so well and is timeless. And I look back on it now and I'm like, man, that's still like relevant today. Like that's still, I always had like so much feeling of inadequacy before it or just quitting. And I was like, no. But now I've gotten used to that feeling where I'm like, okay, you can't be delusional about it. You have to be strategic. You have to be smart. You can't just be like putting yourself in these areas to have all this pressure and it be like wrong. So you have to be smart about it. You have to, listen to people around you. But I feel like the universe keeps on telling you, it keeps on putting you, the pressure comes, and then like it'll keep doing itself. It'll keep moving itself forward. The universe will keep on telling you that.
Yeah, and you think, it's San Antonio, so we got to use a Spurs reference here. And, Popovich always talks about appropriate fear, right? And so it's not that you don't play the opponent. It's that you have respect and appropriate fear for the opponent, right? But you also don't equip your team with C-level talent. You have Tim Duncan and Ginobili on your team. And so it's appropriate fear, but you also come with the right talent and capability and competency to get it done. And I think that's the side of it where you can't just go build something and hope it works out and cross your fingers. You have to do it. It has to be rooted and grounded in something. I mean, real estate development is a pretty practical business. So we saw a lot of success, in the projects we take on. We've seen them proved up elsewhere. We're not doing something for the first time on its own. It's just perhaps the first time here, right? And so making sure we're trying to make those calculated risks that are properly assigning appropriate risk to the type of project we're taking on is still a huge part of what we do. It can be aspirational and try to do something great while still being, set in practicality to a certain extent. And I think that's where we as developers, people that do what I do, have to kind of manage that tension. And our team does it extremely well, I think, where we say, okay, this is what we're getting pushed by all these talented people to do. How far can we take this? And we also need to think about who our customer is and what are they going to be comfortable with. When we did the SODO, the office building out of Mass Timber, there's a lot of new and novel things in that building. The structure is obviously wood, and then we did an underfloor air distribution system to complement it aesthetically. That also kind of was a huge,
it's pretty brilliant,
huge differentiation from what's conventional. But then if you look at our floor plan, it's 2 rectangles put together. There's nothing exceptional about our floor plan, and it makes for an extremely flexible layout for creative office, for interior office space, for exterior, perimeter offices for a law firm, because we were building a spec office. We had to do something that appealed to nearly every potential tenant because we didn't have any tenants lined up when we started it. And so we couldn't cut our opportunities on the front end by certain aspects of the design. And so keeping it a 25,000 foot rectangle made sure we gave ourselves the biggest pool of prospective tenants while doing something creative and really pushing the envelope. And again, I think that's a testament to the team that we had on it. We had an incredibly talented architecture firm in Lake Flato as the design architect, but then we coupled him with Boca Powell, who was done millions upon millions of square feet of office space in their catalog. And so they knew what worked, and they knew what, a Z corridor with restroom bank and elevator banks and all that needed to be successful. And so I think that tension is something that's always fun to really take on in a project. And I think getting that tension right is probably the hardest part of my job.
Yeah. So on the aspect of tension, and I think this will be the last topic, but so Adrian, you had said something about like, why would I want to pay the $7 or the $8 for the coffee? And feel free to cut this, but I feel like San Antonio in particular, out of all the big cities that I've either lived in or visited, is just full of a lot of complainers.
Yep.
Like people just
we're not cutting that.
Bitch you. like holy shit. People just the second that you post something online, it's people are like, oh yeah, there's another something, and no, they're not your fucking customers. Like don't come.
Yeah, I don't even hear you. Yeah.
Right. So where I was going with this is, if you're going against the grain, or it's the beyond the craft, circling all the way back from a granular level to more of a global. How do you being Hunter, how do you deal with that noise, like kind of like the bug in your ear, as far as like, even though it's been done before, San Antonio is a little slower to adopt.
Right.
So how do you keep the confidence? How do you trench forth when you have this kind of negativity around it? Or you built the plane while it was being flown with Soto.
Soto was, I will say it's easier now because I think I understand what you're saying. San Antonio does have, I think most cities have a negative minority that might be loud.
That seemed the loudest.
and so I'm not on social media, so that helps me not be impacted by that too much. But it's funny in real estate, because it's so it's physical, right? It's in front of everyone, and so understandably, people have a lot of commentary on what we do. I mean, I'm sure in your world with everything, if they knew everything you had a finger on in terms of branding that's public, they're going to have an
They have
opinion.
something
on
to
it.
say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And even if it's well intentioned, it doesn't always come across
Right.
that way because it's an opinion on something you've been spending a great deal of time on, right? And so even if it's coming from a good place, it oftentimes will still kind of chafe, right? And that's just that's part of the deal in the business we're in. I think it's not that pervasive at the same time.
Okay, good.
So people will comment. They'll even you take things away. I will take things. This one has taken a while for us to get open, right? Because we've got 10 restaurateurs building out their spaces, and that's the right way to do it. If we had gone and mall boxed them for them and made it sterile, it would have been a missed opportunity. We
Right.
have to let them build out their space to make it theirs, right? It's got to be an extension of their products and who they are and their brand. And so, but what that means is every single one of them, we have to kind of walk them through the municipal permitting process, and they have their own general contractors. So right now we have 4 or 5 different general contractors
gosh.
within 11,000 square feet
I'm so
building
sorry.
out these spaces, which is not the most efficient way to do it. I'll just say that. But it's the right way for this project. And our team is great at dealing with them and managing that. But it has slowed it down. Yeah, it slowed it down. So, yeah, we're going to open a couple months after we intended. So be it. That's part of it. But I'll get questions. When are y'all opening? Well, obviously, that's something that I'm very focused on. And so I'm like, oh, I never thought about that.
Yeah. Good question.
And so, it's like, it's getting that right. And, pleased to announce we are opening in November. And so that's exciting to have a set time frame on it at this point. But, you're right to say that it is part of the noise. It's part of it. Some of it's useful, though, right? I mean, so you're hearing people's opinion, and you can't just cast it aside all the time. You have to hear them and say, well, what's a pain point that's going to be an obstacle to success? And so, San Antonio paying for parking is a hot button item. Well, we're an urban neighborhood. You're going to pay for parking
Right.
in our neighborhood. There's just a reality to it. Now, how much you pay is a pretty small quotient because we want to make sure it's an approachable experience for people in San Antonio. We want to meet the fact that San Antonio is not New York City or San Francisco. We've got our socioeconomic spectrum is lower, right? And so how do you make sure you're a place for San Antonians? Well, you got to be approachable.
Right.
So we want good local food at an approachable price. And so that's who we've targeted as prospective tenants. And the neighborhood accommodates a bounty of parking. We're not going to be parking restrictive. There's tons of it in the neighborhood, either public parking on the streets or across lots. But we need to make sure we're not missing the mark in terms of how we accommodate those customers. And so, we're not going to charge for parking for the first hour. So if you're in there having a quick bite or one beer with a friend, but if you're sticking around for 2 or 3 beers, yeah, you're going to pay a couple bucks for parking.
Right.
Yeah. Which makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that will come around. But I like the way you guys are introducing it. So it's not just slapping someone across the face. It's you're putting the toe in the water, kind of thing.
Touch a little bit briefly on the strategic tenet of Mila.
Oh man, Marco's the best. He's
Shameless plug.
yeah. Marco is he's been up the street for years now, and John Beecham, our president, I think goes there on a daily basis, and so
He actually talks about that on this show.
Yeah.
He was like, Jon is there like every day.
yeah. So I'm not sure that's I guess that was kind of guerrilla tactics for getting Marco to come down to where we were. So it's been a long conversation, but we knew first of all, back to Pine Street. The only concept that failed within Pine Street Market initially was the coffee shop. And it was not because the coffee shop was bad. It was because it was out of cycle with the rest. It wasn't doing lunch and dinner. And so think about it, going into no matter how good a space feels, if it's the only station open, in the morning.
Oh, okay.
It didn't appeal to the customers, right? Because if everything else is shut down, it just feels awkward to walk in a space. And so we made the strategic decision to, like a Joe's on South Congress, have just a standalone kiosk.
Yep.
And knowing what the neighborhood would need, and frankly, we had a coffee shop space, and this is part of reacting to what we intended and how it ultimately played out. We have a ground floor space that was 1,600 square feet in the ground floor of the Soto that we thought this is going to be our coffee shop. We even had a door into our elevator lobby off the side that we ended up closing in because we realized. I talked with Mark Vollmer, who Theory Coffee in town, and Mark was like, I don't want 1,600 square feet.
Right.
I want what I've got going on.
It works
Great, and it's 200 square feet. And I was like, oh, okay. So we decided not to have a 1,600 square foot coffee shop in the ground floor because they didn't want to pay the rent for that when really all they were trying to do was sling good coffee to people and let them go on their way. And so that kind of informed, as we were working through our design on the overall make ready block, what do we do on the hard corner where now Marco was a question we struggled with. We had a couple different design iterations on it, and ultimately we decided, hey, this just needs to be a standalone coffee shop. And so Marco has been there since May, and it's been a great complement to the overall setting. So you've got Marco, doing coffee, lunch, or breakfast through midday. Then you got the food hall open, lunch and dinner, and then you've got idle beer hall that kind of carries it through into the evening. And so you've got this great little micro ecosystem across the courtyard.
That's a perfect word. I was going to say ecosystem.
Yeah. And so we're really excited. Marco's fortunately been, I was candidly a little nervous when he opened in May without the other two open, but he has such a following that it's been a success since day one. And it's frankly been great advertising for us on the rest of the block.
Sure.
So, he's a great fit.
It was like the pre-advertising of like Make Ready. Yeah. Because when he opened that, I mean, it was when you have I talked about this in the last one, when you have like Broadway as the coffee belt of San Antonio, you have all these awesome coffee shops, but you have Marco with a 20-minute line in the heat.
Yeah, with no shade at all. Yeah.
I'm like, Marco, where's
at his current spot, we have shade.
Yeah, but like that was special. And to know like he wasn't just turning and burning coffee even when he was like packed like that and he had a line of 20 people. It's like, no, rain or shine, hot or cold, like people are going to be out there waiting for Marco to like give him a coffee and like give him a smile, give him a name. Like
he has a great smile.
Yeah. So
I don't know how someone who owns a coffee business has teeth that white. I'm like, what are you doing, man?
So when that happened and Marco got that space, I was like so happy for him, so proud of him, and seeing all that and seeing how John like is a freaking customer of him a lot too, and just the guerrilla research y'all did on that end was phenomenal.
Well, so lastly, the ecosystem that you're talking about is one thing, but also there's something for everyone.
Right.
That's one of the biggest things I appreciate about what Make Ready's offerings are. And I don't. We haven't said it on this show, but we talked about it in pre-production and on the calls with you and Rebecca and everything. But let's say, so Rebecca's a vegetarian.
Right.
And what if I feel like having a beef rib that day? But we can both go to the same place.
Right.
And it's not... That's what the communal aspect of what Make Ready provides. It's not like, hey, if you're going to I love Reese Brothers Barbecue. I think it's incredible, but Rebecca might not.
Right.
And
she can eat potato salad there.
That's okay, but like how can you take all of these different perspectives and interests and everything like that and bridge them all together? And I think in real estate that is more atypical than not. And so to your point about, no, I think you are creative. I absolutely think you're creative. It's a different type of creativity.
Right.
I think it's more about placemaking and bridging and kind of dot connecting. Whereas you're unbelievable behind a camera, or if it's me on brand strategy, whatever it may be, but you're absolutely creative. And I really, really appreciate you shedding some light on the impetus and kind of the purpose behind all this. And I wish you nothing but success for Make Ready and any other project that you have.
Yeah, thanks. It's been fun. I'm glad. I look forward to y'all coming and trying it out in about 2 months.
I'll be there all the time.
Yeah.
When are you opening, by the way?
November. November. I'm happy to say that. November. Yeah. So no, we're excited. It's going to be fun. And to your point, the nice thing about a food hall concept, it's not unique to Make Ready. It's just the food hall space is, if you're going to a restaurant with someone who gluten intolerance or vegetarian or whatever, and they have something on the menu that they've just checked on the menu because it checks the box for that person,
right,
but it tastes like, you know what, that's what a food hall does. Everyone gets to do what they do well, and they simplify their menu, and they just do a couple items, and so then everyone gets to have a quality product regardless of what they're in the mood for that day.
Right.
And that's what is exciting, is kind of bringing all those different flavor profiles together and saying, one day you might want an arepa, and one day you might want a burger, and one day you might want a salad, and all of them should be good, and they're all going to be at the same general price point. And I think that's what we're trying to get to.
That's really smart. Yeah.
Love it.
Awesome.
Well, thank you, Hunter.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Fun.
Really, really appreciate it.